Hey everyone, James here at my acoustic piano. This instrument will be tuned 1 week from today, so please excuse the slightly out of tune sounds that you will hear. Today we're looking at the song Yesterday by the Beatles, which came out in 1965. The arrangement we are looking at comes from this book here. It is the Alfred Basic Piano Library Top Hits Solo Book Level 4. Again, the song is Yesterday, and the arranger is Gerou. In this video, we'll be focusing just on the left hand because there's a lot to look at. I would say the left hand is the really challenging part in this music because it's kind of all over the place. And the patterns that we'll look at today will hopefully help you put it together, and then we can look at the right hand in a separate video. Just for now, I'm going to move this out of the way so that we can look at a couple of dry erase boards with some information. I know you won't be able to see them close up, but this will help jog my memory as I walk you through the left hand part. The first thing I want to talk about is just reading notes. This music, for the left hand anyway, stays within a fairly small range on the piano, just from here, the D below middle C, up to here, which is the E above middle C. Actually, it does go up to an F, one step higher. So again, a fairly small range for the left hand. And within that range, there are two notes that are really important. There's the bass F on the F line between the two dots of the bass clef. So when you start reading the music, look at the bass clef, find the two dots, look at the line between the two dots, and know that that is the F below middle C. It's what we call the bass F, and we have a lot of those Fs in this music. Of course, we have a lot of middle Cs too, and those are really helpful reference points as well. Middle C is just one ledger line, one extra line above the bass clef staff. On the piano, those two keys are here. And it's a good thing we're starting with those because of all the chords in this song, I want us to focus first on the chords that have F on the bottom. And several of these include middle C as well. Let me just play a few of these chords where F is on the bottom. So for those chords, let's just think about the quality, the sound quality, the tone quality of each chord. The first one is called an F sus or F sus 4. The sus stands for the word suspension, and this is because the middle note of the chord, which would normally be A for an F major chord, is replaced or temporarily suspended, replaced by a B flat. So instead of this, with A in the middle, we get this, with B flat in the middle. Now, the one with A in the middle is our normal F major chord, and we have plenty of those as well. The next one is called an augmented chord. When you augment something, you make it larger or bigger. And in order to augment the F major chord, we take the top note C up a half step to C sharp. We take it from here to here. So let's hear that with the full chord F, F augmented. And our next chord has a different name. It's a D minor chord, but the way that it's arranged, F is still on the bottom, which is why I wanted to include it here. All we need to do is shift the thumb over to D. So now my thumb is on D above middle C. Let's go over these one more time. F sus, F, F augmented, shifting the thumb, and D minor, shifting the thumb again. So those are the chords that we have where F is on the bottom, and I should specify these are 3-note chords that we're currently looking at. There are places in the music where we have 4-note chords, or other places where the left hand has intervals with only 2 notes at a time. But let's skip ahead to chords that the left hand plays where G is on the bottom instead of F. So we know F is here, G is 1 step higher, and we have several chords where G is on the bottom. Let's hear those. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different chords where G is on the bottom. 2 of them actually have the same name. And let's start with that. We have this one, which is an A7. 7 means it's a 7th chord, so we're adding 1 additional note to the normal 3-note triad. Now, you might be wondering, wait, where is the 4th note? You only played 3 keys, and that's true. I played G, A, C sharp. Well, in the next iteration of this A7, we actually have all 4 notes of the chord. That comes a little bit later, and we will hear it in context later on in the video. So, even though a chord may have 4 notes or even more, sometimes 1 note or more is omitted. It's left out. It just depends on the context of the music. Sometimes it's easier or better to leave something out, and in this case we have 2 different versions of the A7 chord, one with 3 notes and one with 4 notes. But you can tell that they have the same sound quality to them. Our next chord where G is on the bottom, actually the next 2 chords are really simple. We have G major, which is all white keys, G, B, D, and G minor, where the middle note of the chord is different. That's the difference, of course, between major and minor. We take that middle note of the chord, in this case B, and move it down to B flat. Gives it that darker minor sound. There's only 1 more chord where G is on the bottom, and for this one I need to shift my thumb over because it has G, C, middle C of course, and E. So let's go through these again, and I'll do them in the order they appear on this board. A7, G major, A7, G minor, C. Now this last one is a C major chord, even though G is on the bottom. Hopefully you can tell that sometimes the notes of a chord have been rearranged so that the name, the root of the chord, the foundation, isn't always the lowest note that we're actually playing on the piano. Now, of all the chords on this whiteboard here, there are only a couple that we haven't looked at yet, and they have different notes on the bottom. Not F, not G, but E or D. Now we had G, we had F. If we go down, we get E and D. Let's look at the one where E is on the bottom. Here you'll notice that my fingers are spread farther apart because the total distance from the bottom note of this chord to the top is 7 keys or 7 letters in the music alphabet. In fact, this is part of an E7 chord. it is missing one note. Now you could argue that it's actually an E minor 7. It's not totally clear from the music, from the song, because the third, so to speak, is missing. So you could make a case that it's E7 or E minor 7. We don't actually have to play a G or a G sharp, so we don't need to worry about that. We simply have E, B natural, and D. Okay, what about our last chord on this board? For this one, the distance again is a 7th from the bottom note to the top, where D is on the bottom, we have middle C on the top, and there's a B flat in the middle. I love this one. This one appears at the very end of the song, and again, we'll hear that later. Let's talk about the accidentals. In this music, the key signature shows 1 flat, which means that all the B's in the music are flat unless we have a natural sign, and we do have a few of those along the way. More often than not, the B's are flat, but sometimes they are natural. We also have the occasional sharp. If I'm just looking at these bass notes that we're studying now, the only sharps that we have are C sharps, and we've already talked about those. So let's move on to the other dry erase board. Here we'll be taking a look at some of the 2-note combinations that the left hand has. We'll talk about the intervals, the white keys, the black keys, how often we see these combinations, and then we'll look more closely at a slightly more complicated pattern that happens around measures 21, 22, and 23. But starting from the top of the board, we have this. We go from a 6th, covering a distance of 6 letters in the music alphabet, to a 5th. And this 5th is the same combination of the bass F and middle C that we started with when we were talking about note reading. Now there are different finger combinations that you can use to play these notes. I may or may not make some suggestions about fingering as we go through these. I think in this case, it's probably good to use finger number 2 for B flat, and then finger number 4 for F. That way, you have this position where you can actually reach all 4 keys or notes needed for these intervals without having to shift your hand position. Now, the next combination, which is a bit less common, starts off the same way. It uses D and B flat, but instead of a 5th, we go to a 4th. And this is an unusual combination here. It makes a little more sense in context when we're adding some notes in the right hand, but by itself it can seem a little awkward. Anyway, this is another spot where you can use finger number 2 on B flat, and then use the thumb for B natural, using finger number 4 for F like we did earlier. Okay. Now, what about this next combination of notes? Here, we start with a middle C on top, the interval is a 6th, and then the notes go down to another 6th. In fact, this group here ends with the same interval, the same exact combination of notes that we've been starting with at the top here. So we have middle C on top, a 6th below, which is E, and we go down to this. Let me play that one more time. There we go, just a bit stronger so you can hear it clearly. B flat is on the top, D is on the bottom. This is another case where they suggest a fingering that I don't necessarily think is best in every situation. You can start with finger number 4 on E, you can simply use the outer fingers for both sixths. We will be adding the pedal, so that smooths things out. Let's go back to the top of the board for just a moment. This combination that we saw first actually appears 7 times in the song. So as simple as it seems, we really need to have that one down. It's especially important in the beginning, the end, and at the end of different sections within the song as well. The next combination that we saw only happens 3 times, but it is an unusual one, and it's good to focus on that one so that you nail it every time. The last one that we looked at happens 6 times, so quite a bit. In fact, it happens basically 2 times whenever the main melody comes around. Okay, now we'll focus on measures 21 to 23. And for that, I'm going to switch this out for the sheet music. Because for this, we really want to see and hear how this works. Basically, we have a descending pattern in the left hand that goes like this. That by itself is pretty easy. Let me do it one more time. Above this, we have some other notes that are also played by the left hand, like this. But within that, you can still hear the descending pattern. Let me double that descending pattern with my right hand. You'll really hear it. Now, that's not exactly how we need to play this section. Instead of pressing 2 or even 3 keys at a time, we need to break things up and play these broken chords. So that's what the left hand ends up sounding like. But really, even though it's a string of eighth notes for several measures in a row, it's made up of different voices or layers. Let me see if I can demonstrate that even more clearly. Now, that sounds very different, doesn't it? It was a different style, a different rhythm, different types of articulation, but it helps you to hear the layers in the music so that when you play it the way it's written, you really understand how it works. Now, how does the right hand fit in with this? This is where it gets really cool. If we add the pedal, then it really starts to sound like Yesterday. So that's measures 21, 22, and the beginning of 23. Okay, let me go back to the beginning of the song, and I'm going to play through everything with the left hand alone. That way you can hear and see all of the various little bits put together. So, we start with our intervals of a sixth and a fifth. comes our first sus chord with a nice roll to it. Now F major, F augmented, E7, A7, D minor. Now we have our sixths. We have a brief F sus, which goes to a normal F major chord. More sixths. Here's that awkward fourth. Again, that will make more sense when we add the right hand. Sixth, fifth. For this next part, I will just play and not talk because it's basically the same as the patterns we heard starting in measure number 6. Get a bit different. We have G major, A7, and this is the part with the layers we talked about earlier. F major, F augmented, G, A7, descending scale, G minor, C, and another one of our sus chords. Let's keep going. Sixth to a fifth, and our next chord is the only time this one appears in the music. We looked at it briefly earlier. It's D, B flat, C. Now we don't roll this chord, we play it as a blocked chord all together. Hold that for 6 beats, and our bass F and middle C, which is exactly where we started with the note reading earlier. So while this looks complicated, it can be broken down into easier bits. I would recommend, if you're working on this song, go back and watch the earlier part of this video again so that you can hear me explain the different combinations of notes, where they are on the piano, which fingers to use, where the accidentals are, and all of that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a video for the right hand soon.